movement in prayer is like part of just about every tradition. Some it's like in little factions, and some it's kind of been lost even in time. But if you look back in history in any religious or spiritual tradition, you're going to see a spiritual movement practice or
And
a
it's
sitting in silence, like a mindful meditative kind of state is
I don't want
happens
you
in
to get
every tradition.
too far from that movement because I don't know if that's generally known. I do know about Islam. Salat to me looks a lot like sun salutation. And I've been to Catholic churches where you stand, you sit, you kneel, you stay, you sit. But what are you talking about when you say that?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. And in my tradition of Judaism, it's davening. If you see people in deep in Jewish prayer with a prayer shawl over their heads, and there is a swaying that happens with the prayer, but also specific times when we bend our knees, when we bow forward, when we rise up on our toes that are in alignment with what's happening in the prayer. But in some cases, especially in how Judaism has been Americanized in an effort to sort of fit into a larger Christian context, a lot of Jewish prayer service has shifted to be more similar to Christian prayer service as a way to sort of fit into the larger American society.
It's interesting.
But and what I have learned, Kimberly, is most every faith tradition has a contemplative practice, what we call meditation. There is some level of singing, chanting, call and response that's happening. That's a part of it. There are some principles, right, that are embedded within what we call our yamas and niyamas, or the Patanjali's
Ethical
ethical
guidelines. Yeah,
guidelines.
like the Ten Commandments.
Right. So there are in every faith tradition, pretty much so. So there we are more alike than different, and yet because there is this siloing, is how I put it, of the faith traditions, that we don't we there's a lack of trust to cross over unless you're curious. And so, like, you and I had an earlier discussion around what does it mean to be in self-study? What does that mean? And how do you build your commitment to to those things that you want to honor in yourself? It has to come through a level of self-study. And if you're and that level of self-study would make you curious enough to sit in a level of meditation where you're observing your own perceptions and how your perceptions get in your own way.
So there's also text study in every tradition, right? So in the same way that we might look at the Yoga Sutras, we can look at a Bible verse, or we can look at, some prophetic writings and think about, well, how does this apply to my life? Not just what is the historical context, but what is the relevance for me in my life? And movement, there's liturgical dance, there's the hora, like we are every culture has dance in it, right? So we have like a propensity to move as a way to connect with the divine. And it's also not just religious. All of this stuff exists in humanism, in secular life too, in ways of connecting with nature that don't necessarily have, because there are plenty of people, especially in the West, who don't necessarily feel a connection to organized religion and yet still can feel a sense of connectedness to something beyond themselves.